Morning,
Hello, can
Tom.
you hear me?
Morning.
I miss you guys, all of you.
We miss you all.
Mr. Thompson, you are certainly haven't made it to the grocery store for a while.
No, I saw him yesterday.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the City Council meeting on April the 21st, 2020. We will start.
Morning.
Okay, this meeting.
Guys, all of you.
We miss you all. Okay, the meeting has been called to order.
Mr. Thompson, you are certainly
You need to
haven't made it to the grocery store for a while.
No, I saw him yesterday.
Pause that, yeah.
All right.
Okay, we have called to order this meeting on April the 21st, 2020. We will start by making sure that we have a quorum, and we do have a quorum. All city council members are present. So let's move into our chaplain prayer, and Ralph Dawkins, the PD chaplain, is going to lead us in prayer this morning.
Good morning, everyone. This is the day that the Lord has made. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Let's pray. Father, I pray for those that are in authority over this city. I pray and lift up the mayor, her staff, and the assistants, and the city council, the city mayor, manager, and every person and department that is instrumental in leading and directing our city. I pray that you would bless them to work together today in unity to tackle all of the agendas, all the items on the agenda for today. I pray that you will keep them from any division. And I pray that you give them godly wisdom, direction, and instructions on how to best lead and manage our city. I pray that you would give these leaders knowledge and guidance on how to deal with the reopening of our community facilities and businesses, and any other problems that face the city and its people. Thank you that there are no reported cases in our city over the past few days. I thank you that your word says in Psalm 91 that you would deliver us from all of the noisome pestilences. I pray for the chief of police, the police force, the fire chief, the fire department, and all the first responders who serve in this city. And lastly, I pray that you would bless our city with economic prosperity. May you draw them in and attract businesses, industry, and corporations to the city that will produce jobs and revenue and keep it and help it progress and grow. I commit all of these things concerning our city to you, God. And regardless how things may look in the natural, I confess that your word and you were well able to bring all of this to pass as we have prayed for our city and the leaders. It is in Jesus' name I pray. Amen and amen.
Amen.
Blessings to all of you. Do well today. Thank you for your service.
Thank you, Pastor Dawkins. We greatly appreciate it.
Absolutely. Bye.
Our special instructions for today: all members of the council and staff should begin speaking by stating their full name, their SMD position or role within the city. We will move on to item 4, public comment. There have been no submitted public comments, but I just want to read a few words before we get started. I want to thank all of our citizens for quickly adapting to this new normal. It has not been easy to readjust our lives to the COVID-19 world. But because of our quick response as a community, as painful as it has been, we have been able to, at least as of today, keep the positive cases to a low impact in our city. This being said, we are not yet at the finish line. Even though we have had only 41 positive cases, it does not mean that we do not have to continue to be diligent in our commitment to protect ourselves, as well as our families, neighbors, and friends. Our plan is to continue to lessen some of the restrictions imposed on you, your family, and your business. We are reevaluating what we need to do moving forward to ensure that we don't open the door to an avalanche of new cases, but at the same time, as Governor Abbott said, protect our lives and our livelihoods. We will only be successful at opening up our city if each of you continue to be vigilant in your commitment to following the CDC guidelines of wash your hands frequently, avoid touching your face, sanitize, sanitize, sanitize. Continue to practice social distancing and stay at home unless you have essential items that need to be taken care of. As painful as it is, there are still many tough decisions ahead of us. And so continue to talk to us, communicate to us, and let us know what your issues are. With that, thank you, and let's move into the consent agenda.
Mayor,
Yes, ma'am.
before we go there, and tell me if I'm out of line on this, but I have received calls, particularly around golfers being able to golf and tennis players not being able to play tennis. And I had a pretty lengthy conversation with Daniel about this yesterday. Could this be a time where Daniel could just share what he shared with me yesterday regarding where we are with the tennis and how Dr. Veretas is advising?
Sure.
We have received communication from those individuals. Essentially, we've had a lot of questions about golfing here in our community and how to keep that safe. I know that Governor Abbott had talked a lot about making sure that we actually get out there and get some exercise in the community, which is good for us. The golf groups, entities, the three came together and it came up and developed a plan for how to address safety moving forward. We believe they came up with a pretty good plan that was submitted to Dr. Veretas that he did review and made an amendment to his declaration to allow for that. We do encourage other individuals, other groups, those that perhaps have their tennis courts that they like to have operational again, to submit a plan as well to show specifically how they will address the safety concerns that we may have about that. So we do encourage that as well. As the mayor said a while ago, we need your thoughts, your ideas, your concerns. If you feel that there's something we should be doing to assist you, let us know what that is and help us with the plan as well. A lot of times you know a lot more about your industry than we do. So do submit your thoughts and ideas, specifically not looking at the tennis game. If you think that that's an area that should be lightened, we'd love to be able to see your plans as well and hope you move forward with changes there as well.
Daniel, thank you.
All right, we will move into the consent agenda. Do I have, does anyone have an item on the consent agenda that they would like to pull out of approval on the consent agenda at this point? Billy, go ahead.
Yes, Billy DeWitt, single member District 6. I would like to pull item F.
Okay, with that, do I have a motion to approve all items except item F?
Move to approve.
Lucy moved to approve. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Tommy. With no public comment, we'll take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
With none opposed, the consent agenda passes with the exception of item F. We'll move to item F, consider a resolution authorizing the submission of the Department of Justice Assistance Grant application to the Office of the Governor requesting a vehicle for the gang suppression unit. Billy, do you have questions?
Yes, I spoke with Assistant Chief Howard yesterday about this, and he walked me through it. And my question, though, is, I guess one for Teresa. On the report to Mayor and Council, Teresa, it said there is no match on the part of the city. The police department would be responsible for properly outfitting and equipping the vehicle. That was the statement that came to us. Then on the resolution, the second whereas, it says, whereas the city of San Angelo agrees to provide matching funds for said project as required by the Department of Justice Edward Bryan Memorial Justice Assistance Program. So why would we have that language in the resolution, Teresa, when there is no matching fund requirement on the city's part?
Whether or not there's a matching fund requirement, Chief Howard, I think, could answer that question. But these folks send us these template resolutions, and if we make modifications to them, they kick them back to us. So The language doesn't say there is a matching, it's just if there is a matching, then we will be responsible for that. But in this case, you're not approving a matching amount, so the language is not necessary.
Okay, so you're saying it's just boilerplate language and not necessary to be modified? We aren't committing as a city to anything that we don't have to.
No, the only thing you're committing to is the action you're taking today. We have removed that language in the past and they've brought it back to us saying that that's required language in these grant documents. So we had to put it back and take it back to you before.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Does that answer all your questions, Billy?
It does, and I make a motion to approve item F on the consent agenda.
Okay,
Second.
A second by Lucy. With no public comment, we'll take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
With any opposed? With none opposed, item F from the consent agenda is approved. We will now move into the regular agenda. Regular agenda item A, presentation on San Angelo's local small business recovery plan. And Dave Erickson is going to present this to us today. I don't see him on here. There he is. Hi, Dave. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Dave Erickson. I'm the director of the ASU Small Business Development Center. And I'm here today to represent the Economic Resources Task Force. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen for everyone here. Everyone see that okay?
Yes, sir.
Great. This is the Economic Resources Task Force, and the Economic Resources Task Force is made up of many entities here in San Angelo, which I'll cover in the last slide here. This is our recovery plan, which is also a lifeline to our area businesses. And so you can see the graphic here, the areas that we addressed as a task force to assist small businesses during this crisis and their subsequent recovery. And I wanted to touch base on these briefly so that you could get an understanding, and happy to take any questions on these as well. One thing too, this can also help our area of small businesses in the Contra Valley. What's good for the Contra Valley, of course, is good for San Angelo. And as the SBDC, we serve a 10-county area of the Contra Valley. Funding sources is one of the main things here for area small businesses. Many have already received the PPP funds, and the EIDL funds, as we understand, are rolling out. Though both of them are currently out of money, but they expect those to be refunded and open back up this week, so we'll see if that holds. Lender programs is also very valuable, lines of credit and such that lenders can provide besides the PPP. There's also revolving loan funds that we're going to try to get loaded up and to be another source for area businesses. Obviously, getting cash, having funds is key to the recovery. There's certified development financial institutions such as People Fund, Lift Fund, and BCL of Texas that can also provide some loans in this situation. COSID-EC's Business Retention and Expansion Program. We wanted to restart the San Angelo Business Plan competition, and the plan for that is restarting on May 4th, and which will culminate in November with the announcement of the winners. So we're going to bring that back, which has a $70,000 total prize purse. There's also a Make a Difference Fund. What this is a pay it forward type funds, small amounts. We're going to try to load that up. We have people working on it right now. And those are loans, not loans, but those are sources of money for small amounts for people to pay it back if they can. If not, it turns into a grant. But in many cases, they may need these small amounts to survive or to continue to recover. So that's a key area for us to address. The next one is technical business advice and training. That's where the SBDC falls into play. For 30 years, we've been around providing these resources, and we'll continue to do so. There's 4 of us as advisors, full-time advisors, plus a student staff that works behind the scenes for us. And ever since this all started, we probably have seen 300 unique individuals so far in helping through this crisis and the funding that they need. The third one is workforce. They'll be involved in rehiring, recruiting, and retraining, and many other aspects as well. We think this is a key area of recovery for small businesses. And so there'll be a key aspect of that as well. Going to the next slide, local media support. We need the media's help to get behind our effort to highlight the information that we'll provide, the contacts, the contact areas. And I'll talk about that in just a minute, but we also need them help to feature successful small business that are recovering in this process. So they're key. Government support. Local government will continue to support the community and the small business owners during this process. Mentorships and networking assistance. All businesses need mentors. We intend to ramp that up and provide volunteer mentors who can take calls from small businesses to help solve certain problems, such as the mentor saying, this is what I did in that situation, or this is what I would do. And these are retired small business people or other small business people that have the time to work with these businesses. In networking, we have a resource put together that can help with understanding it during this crisis, what kind of networking can they do to help? And so that's another resource we'll provide. And lastly, mindset. During this crisis, some small business owners may need help in getting over a negative mindset, especially as they address their employees and also working through issues related to this. We have a resource that's on board that will take their calls and help work them through this crisis. And this is devastating to the small business community. And I tell you though, the hundreds we've talked to are just amazed at their resilience in the manner with which they've been handling this crisis. And I don't, if they're underlying that, if they have issues that they need help with, of course, this person can definitely help them as best they can. Lastly, I want to show the group of economic development partners who are part of this task force. March 18th is when we started meeting to get together and talk about the crisis and how we can help. And it culminated with this plan of action, this task force to help address these issues. Our goal is to have a single source point of web page information that they can go to. And if they need help with this issue, boom, here's that phone number. If they need help with this issue, here's that number. And make it easy for the small businesses to get to the people that they need for help. And that is our goal, and we plan to ramp that up and get that up very quickly. This is a fluid plan. We'll adjust as we need. And we appreciate y'all's support in this effort, and we'd be more than willing to take any suggestions. You see also on the web page, each page, we have the COVID-19 Resource Hub that the Chamber hosts. On that is all the resources that we currently have been posting, including the SBDC's COVID resource webpage for information. Everything is there basically that we know of that can help people with this crisis, especially small businesses. Thank you. And at this time, I'll take any questions.
Does someone on council have any questions that they'd like to ask Dave? David, thank you so much. Oh, wait, Billy, you have a question?
Yes, Dave, could you speak a little bit more about the Make a Difference Fund that you mentioned?
Yes, I'm glad you asked. It started many years ago with some anonymous donations, and it's administered by the Country Valley Community Action Agency. They administer the funds. And there's a committee set up to take requests from small businesses or those starting a small business for small amounts of funds to get them started, to get them up and running and whatever needs. So that committee evaluates that request and then indicates to the Community Action Agency that they think they should be dispersed as money. We ask them to pay it forward. Some do, most do, not all do, but there's no requirement to pay it back. Of course, it becomes taxable income for them. It becomes taxable income. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Dave, it's a small fund. It's like $1,000 fund. So it's
That's
not a big chunk of money. It's a little bit of, if you will, seed money of some kind, but it is not something that one will get a big dollar amount from. The bigger dollar amounts come from the federal government, things that he covered earlier in terms of
Yes.
money, the PPPs, et cetera.
Thank you. We envision that it could be a case where a small business says, I need to make this payment, or I need to fulfill this obligation by this time, or I'm in danger of going under. And then we envision that this fund can be used for something like that and other reasons as well. But that's one thing. And so we have 2 people working on loading that fund up with funds, and to get it activated and going as quick as possible.
And just one final question, Dave. The Community Action Council is the initial point of contact should someone be interested in applying for funds?
That's a very good question. It probably won't be the initial point. It'll probably be more like us, the SBDC. We're highly involved in getting it started years ago. And so we'll be the initial contact. We can explain it, explain the process, and put together the committee when needed to address these requests. So they're more of administrating the funds and releasing the funds and receiving payments for those pay forward payments. So that's kind of their role. They're, as you know, a 501c3, and that's kind of their role.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
But what Dave didn't have up on the screen today is the screen that will reflect the questions. If you need help for this, call this number. If you need help with this, call this number, so that people aren't having to dig deep into the website to figure out what number to call for what issues. So it'll even be clearer when you open that up and say, here's the number to call if you want information about X. So it'll be very driven by how to get in contact.
Thank you. We're working on that as we speak.
All right, Tommy?
You addressed the question I had, Mayor. Was there a single point of contact? But it sounds like there will be different points of contact based upon need. So that was going to be my question. So good. Thanks, Dave.
Thank you. Any further questions? All right, thanks, Dave. Keep working.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we will move into item B on the regular agenda. Consider terminating the month-to-month lease with Eggemeyer Incorporated for 15,000 square feet of land out of Bart DeWitt Park. And Carl, you will be presenting today.
Yes, Carl White here, Parks and Recreation Director for the City of San Angelo. If I could give a quick background, a little bit of background on this item, and then give a staff recommendation. And then I do have some words from Mr. Howard Taylor that he would like to share regarding this item.
Okay.
Okay, on this item, I'm trying to make sure I do this right. Okay, a quick orientation of where the property is. This is South Oak Street. The river is down below this property.
Carl, we can't see the screen. We can't see anything.
Okay. Still not yet?
No, sir.
We did practice this.
Well, just keep talking through it. We've got the background information in our packets, so just talk through it.
Okay, this is down along the river by Oak Street. Eggemeyer Incorporated leased about 1/3 of an acre of Bart DeWitt Park. The lease dates back to 2005, and it had a 5-year initial term. So that term expired in August of 2010. That lease has a holdover clause that carries over month to month. And so that lease has been able to extend itself month to month with that holdover clause. In 2015, we took an item to City Council because we had not seen progress in the intent of the lease. And the original intent of the lease is to lease the city property such that that property could be incorporated with the old blacksmith shop that was owned by the Eggemeyers and turned into an agricultural museum. That has yet to be achieved. We took that item in 2015 asking for termination. Council directed us to work with Howard Taylor, who had stepped in and who honestly has made the most progress on this, getting towards establishment of the museum. He stepped in. He created a not-for-profit organization. It's called the Farm and Ranch Museum. That was established as a 501c3. That designation of that 501c3 has since been dissolved. And the bottom line is that Eggemeyer Incorporated, with whom we have the lease, has failed to open up the premises as an outdoor historical agriculture museum, as is required by the lease terms. And in such, Eggemeyer Incorporated is in default, and the city has failed to realize the public benefit in leasing this site. As far as my recommendation, I recommend that we seek termination of this lease. I do have some words from Mr. Howard Taylor, and I'll make it quick. In his letter he gave me yesterday, the bottom line, he states, and I must say that he worked very diligently. He created the board. I was ex officio on the board. We met several times over the last several years. We were making really good progress. But that 501c3 at this point has expired. I'm reading his words now, but we still maintain our state nonprofit status as an organization. If City Council would allow another 60 to 90 days for us to have a dialogue with the Eggemeyer family, we may be able to come up with a permanent solution where we could move ahead and fulfill the promise and the exciting public use that is possible at that location. The reality is that the city agreed in 2005 to designate a piece of land for the purpose of creating a place for public benefit. And in 15 years, that has transpired. That simply has not happened. And that's the end of my presentation.
Do I have questions from council for Carl? I think the big issue for me is that Howard asked for 60 to 90 days for continued conversation, but we've had 15 years of conversation. So I think we have to have some sort of definitive action either, and we can determine what that action is, but I wouldn't recommend adding another 60 or 90 days to it. We're 15 years down the road and we need some real firm direction and action. So Harry, did you want to add something?
Certainly. Since before I was on council, back as far as when Howard and his group put this 501c3 together, I've asked Eric to let me come on the property and take a look at it. And here we are. Next month, I'll be on council 4 years and I've never set foot on that property. So from my perspective, I have to agree with the mayor, and that is we've had 15 years. I'm not sure 60 or 90 days is going to help us resolve this, quite honestly. I think the idea is grand, but we've not made any progress on it in 15 years. And so from my perspective, I'd like to get the land back to the city and let's go forward.
Billy, did you have a question or comment?
No, I didn't.
Okay, who else might want to make ask a question or make a comment? All right, do I have any kind of a motion, Harry?
Certainly. I move to approve the item 6B as presented,
And that is what?
and that is to terminate the lease.
I'll second that, Mayor.
Is there any public comment concerning this item? With no public comment, we'll take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? With none opposed, motion passes 7-0. We'll move on to item C. Consider approving a change order to the contract with Reese Albert Incorporated under RFB ES-02-18 in the amount of $123,164.85 for additional pavement repair on the Bell Street project and authorizing the city manager to execute all related documents.
Morning, Council. Lance Overstreet Engineering Services. Hope you all are well today. I really only have one slide kind of trying to explain what's going on with this project. And as you can see, what we have done is the water line was relocated out of Bell Street, and it was put in the right-of-way to the east of Bell Street. And in doing so, it actually cut across a lot of different properties that currently had pavement and parking in the right-of-way. And so when the engineer of record had performed all of the calculations and the quantities, they only looked at the pavement repair as it was crossing streets, not necessarily the pavement repairs that would be required as it was cutting through those parking lots. And so as you guys are aware, the rule on the right-of-way is that if you are a business owner and you put items in the right-of-way, it's really an at-risk type of thing. And so by letter of the ordinance, we would not have to replace that pavement. I do believe, though, that as a good neighbor of the city and as a support to those businesses, it would really be sad for us to go through and tear up the pavement to put that water line in and then not include that in the portions of the repair. And so this $123,000 is basically primarily for the repair of those parking lots and those driveways where the water line has cut across those different businesses and those different entities.
Do I have questions from council? With no question, Harry, did you have a comment or a question?
I do have a question real quick for Lance. We knew this project actually was delayed several months because we knew that we had issues with right-of-ways. Is this something different from what we looked at when we started this project 4 years ago?
No, it's not different, Harry, in that everywhere that water line is at is actually the city-owned right-of-way. Where that, as you can kind of see from that image that I had put up before, what's happened, Harry, is that a lot of the business owners have paved right up to the curb line. And so their parking lots are probably extending into the city's right-of-way by 20 feet, 30 feet in areas. It is not the active drive area. So we're not in the lanes of traffic, but it is actually in these portions of the city, the property that the city owns. And so that is an area that's kind of in that gray where it's an at-risk. We tell everybody as they're developing their businesses that if the city has to tear it up, we're not obligated to fix that. We're not obligated to fix the landscaping. But on a $20 million project, $120,000 goes a long way to benefit those businesses, to show them that we're supporting them. And by default, we did tear the driveways and the pavement and the parking up by moving that water line. And so it's just being conscientious of partnering with those businesses rather than coming back to them and saying, okay, now you've got to pony up the money to fix your own parking lot when we tore it up.
Well, I appreciate that. And I think that's something that's really, really nice for the businesses. But I would say that 15 years down the road, if we've got a problem with that water line, are we going to do the same? Is a future council going to be burdened with the same type of issue?
The the whole idea is that that new water line should have roughly a 40 to 50 year minimum life expectancy on it. And so we don't anticipate it being anytime in the near future. At some point, there will have to be maintenance done on that water line, and we may be tearing up a portion of those paved areas again if it happens to fail in that specific spot. There again, we're hoping to get 40, 50, and sometimes you can get up to 70 years off of a new PVC water line. So at this point, that's quite a ways down the road.
Billy, you had a question or comment?
I do. Lance, I agree with you or with your statement that we need to be good neighbors. And if we tear up somebody's property, even though it's in the right of way, I'd like to see us do right by that. But my question is, in the background information, it said that engineering is currently in communication with the engineering firm of record regarding this oversight. So could you say more about that? I mean, was it something that was missed in our original calculations, or what happened there?
Sure, we actually believe it was missed. If you recall, a lot of the plans that were produced were a 2D line type plan. There was very little plans that were done with an aerial photo over the top of it. And so as the engineering firm was doing those plans, they really just saw the streets that were identified, and then they saw the lots that were identified. They didn't necessarily see anything that would stand out to them to show, hey, there's a parking lot that we're cutting through, because we did not use aerial imagery on a lot of those plans. And so we actually became aware of the situation when our current contract, Reese Albert, mowed their crew out there and their asphalt crew out there to start doing work. And within one day of working, we had already blown through the entire budget and weren't even making a dent in what was left. And so it was an oversight. It was kind of something that was missed by the engineering firm and by engineering and the city who reviewed those plans. We just had that mindset that the water line is going in our right of way. We own it. And so there's no issues there. But then taking a look at that aerial imagery that we had a little bit earlier, it's pretty obvious that it's cutting right through a lot of those parking lots that go right up to the curb line.
So is the engineering firm of record, is it being considered that they would cover some or all of this cost?
At this time, Mr. DeWitt, it's very preliminary. We have reached out to them as to how they came up with their calculations and to provide us the basis of how they determined the amount of pavement cut. We do have the funds in the project to cover the cost, regardless of what happens in the outcome. And the reality is that this change order is going to be needed regardless of who pays for it. And so that's why we kind of brought it to you guys at this point, knowing that whatever may come about as to the overall funding at the end, it's not going to change the fact that it's going to have to be done. And it's not going to change the fact that our contractor has his crews there ready to do the work right now. And so there is always that possibility that the engineering firm may feel that there's some responsibility on their part. That's a discussion that we will be having with them and legal to get clarification on. But at this time, we're moving ahead as if the contingency funds will cover that unless we find out otherwise in the discussions with them.
Thank you.
I believe strongly that we need to approve it. Many of these businesses have called, been in contact and said how much this project, is excited as they are about it, have had such a huge negative impact on their business. So I think they've paid a big price already. So I think the quicker, the faster we can move on with this, get their businesses up and running, and accessibility to their property really important right now.
I agree with you, Mayor.
Thank you. All right, with that, Lucy, go ahead.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to ask Lance, can you remind us of the date of completion for Bell Street again so people can know?
Sure. I would have to actually look back on all the documentation to find out the exact date. It was a 3-year project. We're about 1.5 years into it. We have almost completed all the utility work. In fact, that should be done in the next week or two. The north end of that project is completely done north of the loop. We are about halfway through the second phase of that south of the loop. And so we are actually ahead of schedule, probably by about 6 months right now. And so that 3-year project timeline that we had, we are looking at that being 2 to 2.5 years. And so we're anticipating probably about another year before everything is complete.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Lucy. Further questions or comments, anyone? Okay, so do I have a motion for approval?
So move to approve, Mayor.
Okay,
Second.
a motion by Billy, a second by Lucy. No public comment, so let's take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
None opposed, motion passes 7-0.
Thank you, Council.
We will move into item D, first reading and public hearing of an ordinance approving an amendment to the master thoroughfare plan to remove or relocate a future minor arterial street being the westward extension of Lakeview Heroes Drive between North Chadbourne Street and Grape Creek Road. John, you're on.
Okay. As you mentioned, this is an amendment to our master thoroughfare plan, which is the overall plan for future roads throughout the city. And just real quickly here, you can see this red line is the existing thoroughfare. And what you can't see, at least on this slide, is this is Lakeview Heroes Drive that comes in and ends right here at Grape Creek Road. There is currently the road does not extend past Grape Creek, but it's been on the plans for about the last 25 years that at some point that Lakeview Heroes would extend and continue on over to Chadbourne. And so we had a property in this area want to develop, and that triggered them having to be responsible for a portion of this extension through the back parts of their property. And so as we started looking at that, we thought cutting through the middle of the back part of these properties probably doesn't make the most sense. So we worked with multiple staff throughout the city to look at a variety of options and you can see, I'll go through each of these in more detail in just a minute, but you can see here the various different options. One is to eliminate the thoroughfare altogether through this area. Another is to shift it slightly to the north so that it is on the back of these very large properties. And in that way, it wouldn't affect as many buildings and homes. Another option is to shift it down to 49th Street. And then another option is to shift it up to Colley Lane at the north. Just looking at the zoning and future land use of this area, it's mostly residential, but of course along Chadbourne is various types of commercial zoning. As I mentioned, this extension has been in the master thoroughfare plan since at least the 1994 plan. And then it's been revised slightly over the years. As it notes here, the 1994 plan had that along 49th Street. But because of the existing homes on 49th and the relatively narrow street, at the time it was thought that didn't make sense for a minor arterial. So in 2003, it was shifted to the north in the plan to where you see it today. Staff did look at the existing development in the area and the zoning, talked with other departments as well as the MPO and the county. And in doing that, we came up with these 5 alternatives for moving that. I kind of briefly went through them, but if you have questions about individual options, feel free to ask those. But option 1 is simply removing it. One of the reasons that this arterial is in there for future plans is to help with traffic, especially clearing out of events like at the Coliseum and the Fairgrounds area. This would help get traffic, another way to get traffic out after events. Also, just as the area develops, providing an additional arterial type roadway to move traffic throughout the area. The second option is to leave it where it is. Basically the red line on the map that you see there. It does, as I mentioned, cut through those properties and would affect a number of homes as well as accessory buildings, storage buildings, and those sorts of things. The option here is shown in green is to shift it north. This moves it away from most of the homes and accessory buildings and puts it along the backside of the larger properties that are to the north. And it would have many fewer effects on those existing properties, especially the homes. I will mention, as I'm on this slide, this is the city's recommendation. City staff was also supported by the MPO staff and the county commissioner in this area.
I have a question,
On
Mayor.
the option 3, John, on the option 3 where it says affects fewer existing homes, 1 or 2, any home that it affects is an issue. So are people are living in these homes now? These homes have been here for a long time. Talk about the existing homes.
Yeah, and basically, as we talk about the Thoroughfare plan, it's really just a kind of a conceptualized idea of where a future roadway would go. To determine exactly which homes it would affect and what that effect would be would really come down to the actual engineering and design of the road once we ever get to that point. So we're not talking today about actually going out and constructing a road. We're just mapping it so that we preserve that corridor for the future. And so basically the homes that would be affected by this option 3 would be right here at the corner where Lakeview Heroes comes into Grape Creek Road. And so there are a couple of different options there. One is just to extend Lakeview Heroes straight through, and that would affect 1 or 2 homes that are right there at the corner, punching the road through, basically like you see in green here. Another option would be to start to veer Lakeview Heroes to the north before it gets to Grape Creek, so it shifts it northward a little bit, and then comes across Grape Creek. That would simply affect different homes. Again, it would probably be able to be designed where it would only affect 1 of those homes, and which one just depends on the actual route as it gets designed at that point.
So let's talk about the road development. In other words, this road certainly is not something the city's going to pay to have done. So whoever develops this property is going to be the person who pays for whatever new road and connector.
Yes, most new roads in the city are constructed as development occurs, and so as these larger properties to the north here, as they develop, they would be responsible for dedicating their share of the right-of-way for that road, and they would be responsible for their share of the construction of that road. And so what would likely happen in this area is that, let's say one of these middle properties developed, we probably wouldn't make them build a portion of a road that doesn't go anywhere, but they would set aside the land for the road and possibly even set aside a share of the funding for the road, but it wouldn't be constructed until later. At some point, the city would most likely have to partner, as maybe like 80% of this road, it gets dedicated and is ready to develop. There would probably be pieces like those homes at the corner, those are likely not to redevelop. And so, let's say 80%, 90% of the road was dedicated and ready to be constructed. At that point, the city would have to go in and likely purchase those homes or the individual home in order to finish that last little piece of the roadway out.
Billy, I think you had a question for John.
Yes, and part of it was answered by your comments, questions, Mayor. But John, on option 1, can you go over the downside again of just leaving it alone? I attended the planning meeting where this was discussed at the planning meeting, and it seemed like there was a lot of opposition to all of the options. And I mean, what is the need for us to do anything with this right now? Well, I'll answer that 2 ways. One, the immediate need is there is a route shown on the Thoroughfare plan. And so that's affecting development in this 49th Street area. And so in order to re-subdivide or replat one of those properties,
either we need to move the road off of that property, or they're going to have to be responsible for their share of that road. And again, as we looked at that, we didn't think that was the most appropriate location for the road. The bigger picture is just, for future development, as the city continues to grow, with the thoroughfare plan, we try to ensure that there are adequate roads going throughout the city, particularly in this area, as I mentioned, to get traffic into and out of the fairgrounds area. But that's really the question. As you kind of alluded to, the Planning Commission, option one was their recommendation to you to basically eliminate this. I think their feeling was traffic coming down Lakeview Heroes could come north up Great Creek, get over on Collie, or all the way up to 2105, if they're getting out of town to the north. If they're going south into town, they could turn south on Grape Creek and get down to Chadbourne that way. And so the Planning Commission felt like this connection wasn't as critical. And so that's really the question, is how critical is a connection to extend Lakeview Heroes over to Chadbourne?
And John, just follow up on that. It seems like this was prompted because a resident on 49th Street needed to do something or wanted to do something with their property. Can they still do that if we go with option one, just leaving it alone?
Well, option one is actually removing that thoroughfare altogether. And so that would allow them to proceed with the development as they envisioned. Option two is to leave it as is. That would affect them because if, in order to replat their property, they would have to dedicate the part of the right of way for that roadway as part of that replat, which is something they did not want to do.
Okay, all right.
Any other questions for John before he continues? All right, John, continue.
Option four is to upgrade Collie Lane. And so instead of any of the options farther south, we would just take Collie Lane, which is now just a local street, and then we would make it a minor arterial. Some of the problems with that is Collie Lane is already fairly narrow. And so the widening of that would at the very least take in some front yards of people's homes, but in some cases might encroach close enough that we would have to, move or remove a home in a couple of cases at least. And it would also result in moving fences and a lot of things. So I don't think, no one really liked that idea after really looking into it of moving it up to Collie Lane. And then option five was to relocate it back down to 49th, which is where it was in the 1994 thoroughfare plan. And that has many of the same issues as Collie Lane. In fact, it's a little worse because 49th Street is even narrower. And so widening it to an arterial standard road, there's really just not the space there, and the homes are too close to that roadway to really make that a feasible option. We did send 66 notices out to all of the properties that are affected by any one of these options. So everyone along all five options were notified. And I know this is kind of a busy map, but it shows you all of the opposition that we received and how many were opposed to which option. And so I won't go down through the whole list, but as you can tell, most of the people along Collie Lane were opposed to making Collie Lane the arterial. And the people on 49th were opposed to that option. And so, but you can see here with the different stars there that all of the different opposition that we got. As you can see, we did get a few in favor as well. Mostly it was people who were on one option being in favor of one of the other options, as you might expect. We can come back to this if you have questions, but I'm going to move on from that. As I mentioned, staff did recommend option 3, which is relocating it slightly northward. And then the Planning Commission at their March meeting recommended option 1, which is complete removal of that arterial from the plan. And that was a 4-2 vote, with 2 of the commissioners would have been in favor of the staff recommendation. So that's kind of an overview. I'd be happy to answer any other questions.
Well, I think I guess I would make a motion to remove it, option 1.
Mayor, is Tom Thompson on here? Would he have any comment regarding how he sees it?
Absolutely, Billy. And I'm going to go with Mayor Gunner, the people I've talked to and planning. It's only an issue about 3 weeks out of the year during the rodeo. And to be honest, it's only an issue if we boil that down to about 6 days out of the year. So the future development of this, as far as being economically feasible to even develop that road, I don't see it. Now, I do see John's point that maybe if something came out there in 50, 60 years, we built a new event center, we might need that. But most people are going south out of there anyway. I will second the mayor's motion to remove it and not even have it on there.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. No public comments, so we'll take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? With none opposed, motion passes 7-0 for option 1, eliminate. All right, we will move on to item E, first reading and public hearing of an ordinance approving a rezoning from the single-family residential zoning district to 2-family residential zoning district at 1718 Live Oak Street. John, you're on.
Yeah, this is a, there we go. This is a rezoning on Live Oak Street. This is the 1700 block. You can see here the building is a single family home, although it's been used as a duplex in years past. The new owner is simply requesting to rezone from RS1, which is single family zoning, to RS2, which would allow for a duplex use of the property. It is in the future land use plan as neighborhood. It's currently zoned RS1, as I mentioned, but the RS2 would also be consistent with the neighborhood designation. Here's a little bit more of a zoom out of the area showing that similar rezonings have occurred in the vicinity in recent years. Similar uses where either for an accessory apartment or for a duplex type use. So this is not inconsistent with that area. In particular, there are a couple of reasons why this makes a lot of sense. If you're driving down Live Oak or if you're driving down Van Buren, you would drive by this and think it's a single family house. So one entrance is from Van Buren, and then on the other side is an entrance from Live Oak. And so, like I said, you would not think of this as a duplex because it's on a corner and each front door faces each of the 2 streets. And so that's a very good design way to sort of hide the fact that it's a duplex. And as I mentioned, this has been used as a 2-family residence on and off over the years. And the new owner simply wants to fix it up, remodel it, and continue to use it as a 2-family use. We did send out the notifications to the surrounding property owners. We did receive 2 in favor and then 1 in opposition. And you can see where those responses were from there on the map. The one that was in opposition did mention the concern was parking. However, I'll note that just as part of our development standards, they will be required to meet the on-site parking standards, which I believe they can already do on the site, but that's definitely the plan. As I mentioned, this it is neighborhood designation in the comprehensive plan, which is consistent. It is an older area of town that does have a similar mixture of uses where this has been, these types of conversions have been done over the past years. And as I mentioned, the existing structure has been used as a 2-family dwelling for decades, on and off. Staff does recommend approval, as did the Planning Commission unanimously at their March meeting. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions from council on this item? With no questions from council, do I have a motion for approval?
I'll make a motion. I'm certainly fine with this. There's, like you said, there's a mixture of duplexes in that area, and it's already been utilized as it's for, so it's just almost making it right. So I'll make a motion to approve.
Okay, thanks, Elaine. Do I have a second?
I'll say,
Somebody seconded. Tommy, I'm going to give it to you as a second. And with no public comment, we'll take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
None opposed, motion passes 7-0. We will move to item F, second reading and public hearing of an ordinance approving a request for approval of a rezoning from the single-family residential and ranch and estate zoning districts to the general commercial and single-family residential zoning districts being 14.880 acres located on West Loop 306, 0.4 miles east of North Bentwood Drive, and 0.3 miles west of Foster Road. John, you're on.
Okay, this you've seen a number of times. This should be the last time you see it. This is the recently annexed property just off of Loop 306, just to the west of Foster Road. You've seen this before. The front part of the property would be rezoned to commercial. The back part would be single-family residential. This is the second and final reading. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Do I have questions for John on this item?
Mayor, I'd move approval and ask Julia, as she did last time, just to note when water comes within 200 feet of these residences, they will be required to tie on at each homeowner's expense, just so we'll have that on the record down the road. But with that, I'd move approval of the item.
All right, Tommy has a motion. Do I have a second?
Second, Harry Thomas.
Harry Thomas has seconded the motion. May we take a vote? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
None
Aye.
opposed. Motion passes 7-0. We will move to item G, first public hearing and introduction of an ordinance amending the budget for the fiscal year beginning October 1, 2019 and ending September 30th, 2020 for grants, capital items, and projects. Tina?
Thank you, Mayor. Tina Dearcy, Director of Finance. I can get my video up here. Okay. So this is the budget. We have several budget amendments on this item. And I think Kimberly's going to pull up the slides for us. The first one is for a grant from the Texas Historical Commission. We are recommending that for the matching portion of that grant that we use Fund 103 fund balance in the amount of $17,500. There we go. It's a 50% local match. I have asked each of these directors or managers to be on the line as well in case you guys have questions about the actual projects themselves. But other than that, we'll move fairly quickly through these. One is to budget for a Homeland Security grant for an emergency management trailer and generator. We are needing budget an additional $25,000 for tiers fund. $25,365. Okay, on the next slide is the Texas Bank Sports Complex. We are budgeting from fund balance for projects that City Council approved on March 3rd. Next is the CARES grant. We are receiving almost $389,000 for the CARES Act grant. That will be additional CDBG funds that the city will receive. We may need to use a small portion of that for some immediate needs, but for the bulk of that, Bob Salas will be bringing back a project to the City Council for approval of a program related to COVID-19. And finally, we are requesting to use $70,000 from the fund balance in Fund 502, our capital projects fund, to get the City Hall waterproofing project to a point where we can pause and I guess kind of regroup on that effort with Ron Lewis. That is all of the amendments we have. Did y'all have any questions on any of those?
I want to ask about the Texas Bank Sports Complex number.
Yes, ma'am.
Number one, we asked to have information on profit and loss or expense and revenue on the bank sports complex, which we have not seen yet. And then number two, knowing what's going on right now, would we still support without question the $600 and some thousand for the bank sports complex?
I would expect to see an impact to their revenue stream for this year and possibly well into next year.
But we haven't seen the one we asked for already.
Yes, ma'am. Through discussion with Daniel, we decided that that was a better conversation to have in person. So we've been trying to wait until we're in front of city council so that we can have a better discussion about that.
So how will this impact the fund balance?
It will take it down to a 90-day operating reserve, I believe is where we took it to. Carl, is that correct?
It's 75 days what we worked up, but the fund balance has grown since then. We were working off audited December 2019 figures.
But with the amount of things that have been canceled, you were using that off of old revenue numbers based off of current revenue projections. Would it still be 75 days to 90 days? Is it 75 or is it 90?
So it's the 75 days is council's goal for that fund. And it would take the fund balance to a 75-day operating reserve. That will not change. What might change is the amount that falls to fund balance in the current fiscal year, or for example, if expenditures exceed revenues this fiscal year, that would also draw down on the fund balance. So if they don't see the revenue in the amount that's enough to cover whatever expenditures they do make, then yes, that would have an impact on fund balance.
The other thing, something went wrong with the screen, whatever. There was a slide up there about tiers, but we never heard what that tiers issue was.
Okay, so that was brought to you by, I believe, John James on February 18th for a list of projects that they were that were approved by the tiers board and then approved by city council. And so that's just the additional funds, the $25,000 that they needed to pull from their fund balance in order to accomplish those incentives.
Oh, so they approved money that was not in existence, so they had to prove it from fund balance, or was it?
Yes, ma'am. It hadn't been budgeted yet, but of course, any money in that tiers funds fund balance is restricted and reserved for use in the incentive programs.
Okay. Do I have questions from council? With no questions from council, do I have a motion to approve Tina Dursky's budget amendments?
Mayor, Tommy Hebert, single member District 1, I move to approve as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Lucy made the second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
None opposed, motion passes 7-0. We'll move to item H, discussion regarding the issuance of 17.5 million combination tax and revenue certificates of obligation to provide funds for street improvement projects. Tina, I think you're on this as well as Vince Bial.
Yes, ma'am. Are you seeing my slides?
Now we are.
Okay. Okay, so to use an overused phrase at this point in time, in an abundance of caution, we are bringing this back to you, though you've already approved a parameters ordinance and approved the issuance of this bond or the certificates of obligation. But again, we just wanted to come back and make sure everybody was still comfortable with that. This is the $7.5 million. It's part of our 10-year plan, $16 million of that being for regular street reconstruction and improvement projects. The other $1.5 million related to the streets the way to the airport. These certificates will be amortized over a 20-year period, and it will not increase the tax rate. This would provide funding, again, for the continuation of the street reconstruction improvement program, and the current market is expected to yield favorable interest rates, pardon me. I will say the one reason and one point of direction that we really need from the council at this point is the use of fund balance, the debt service fund. We did, when we originally brought this idea, we told you that we would use $1.5 million from the fund balance in the debt service fund. That money is still there and available, but again, being cautious, we don't know what impact we will see to property values in the next year or two. And so we would recommend using a lesser amount of the fund balance and possibly even none. Has run models on using $1 million upfront and $0 upfront, and those are still within our debt capacity. So at this point, I think I'll let Vince take the mic and kind of walk you guys through what that would look like.
Thanks, Tina. Mayor, council members, good morning. My name is Vince VL with Specialized Public Finance. We have run some models using approximately $1 million in fund balance and also using no fund balance, and the impact is very minimal for either transaction. By utilizing the $1 million in INS fund balance, it basically frees up about a penny on our tax rate starting in year 2030. Now, given what we're looking at as far as possible economic issues this year and next year, from my standpoint, I feel safer for the city to maintain this INS fund balance on hand in case we need to use this INS fund balance to help mitigate any kind of a tax rate increase. If our ad valorem taxes collections are not where we think there will be, if our sales tax collections are not as budgeted, it gives us flexibility and insurance in case we need it. So I would recommend that we consider not using any INS fund balance at this time. If it comes to a point where we don't need it, we can always use that INS fund balance in the 2022 issue that we have structured in the model right now. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions the council may have.
Does council have a question for Vince or for Tina? I make a motion that we continue with what we originally approved, the $17.5 million. We know that these projects are projects that we consider high priority projects, and I think we need to figure out how to make it happen.
I'll second that, Mayor. I agree with you.
Okay.
Mayor, can I get some additional direction on whether you would like for us to use that fund balance or just to issue the debt without the use of the front loaded payment?
Well, I think the issue is we want to do the 17.5 million, so that you have to tell us whether you need to use fund balance to do it.
We don't.
Okay, so then we won't be using fund balance. You're simply going to offer the debt certificates of obligation to pay for the 17.5 million.
Okay.
That's correct.
Okay.
Tina, does that impact any project that's either currently in I'll say well into the planning phase, or anything that we were going to do without using the fund balance?
No, it does not.
Okay. Okay.
All right.
My second stands, Mayor.
All right. So this is really a discussion. We don't have to take a vote, but I think we should take a vote. So all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
None opposed. Motion passes 7-0. We will move to item 7, follow-up and administrative issues. Consider approving various board nominations. The Public Art Commission, Royal, I'm not sure I can pronounce his last name, Dalglish. Okay, so that's it. Thank you for the SMD2 to a second term, and Susanna Aguirre, SMD3 to a second term, both ending April 2022. And then the Water Advisory Board, Kendall Hirschfield, former government official, Jonathan Jennings, meteorologist, Ben White Weiss, Rural Water, Steve Floyd, TGC, representative to a third term, Casey Barrett, banker, and Todd Coles, COSA-DC representative to a second term, and Scott McWilliams, UCRA representative to a first term, all ending April 2022. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Tommy, second by Lane. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, motion passes 7-0. Item B, announcements and consideration of future agenda items. Do we have any? With none, we will move for adjournment if I have a motion in a second.
So moved.
Second.
Second by Lucy. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you all. Motion accepted. Adjournment happening.
Be safe.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.